The Vacant Echoes. A fragmented descent. An exploration of a doomed fate in modern 2025 Earth. A mind splintering, where forbidden knowledge is whispered from deep within, and the isolation of cosmic insignificance becomes utterly unavoidable. Shattered beginnings. In the waning hours of a 2025 night, the kind that drapes the urban landscape in unsettling silence, a solitary building stood at the nexus of forgotten suburbia and modern despair. Its facade, a mix of aging brick and stubborn glass, bore the patina of neglect. Windows glimmered in the half-light as if hiding secrets too deep for the world outside. Here, in a modest but troubled house on the outskirts of a teetering metropolis, a man lived a life punctuated by moments of eerie dissonance, a life in which reality seemed as fractured as the stained glass remnants of a bygone era. He had not chosen isolation. Isolation had been grafted onto him with his very birth. From as early as memory allowed, there existed in him a counterpoint, a chorus of voices, forever whispering truths that lay beyond mortal ken. They had no known origin, yet their presence was perennial, as natural to him as breathing. There was no comfort in the fact that these voices were both his curse and his constant companion. They were never the result of tragedy, but rather of a destiny sealed in the darkness before his first cry. Born with them, he was doomed from the start, an unwilling oracle burdened with forbidden knowledge. In the earliest fragmented recollections, the man, who might once have been called Darien, though names blurred in his own memories, remembered an ambiguous lullaby, a subtle resonance embedded in every heartbeat, every breath. On many mornings, before the first pale light seeped through the curtained windows, he would awaken to an almost imperceptible susurrus, a melding of echoes that neither soothed nor threatened. But as day broke, the voices would recede into the background, only to surge back when twilight came, drawing him away from routine and into the realm of the uncanny. The house itself was complicit in the slowly encroaching madness. Every creak of its ancient floorboards, every irregular hum of the modern heating system intermingled with inexplicable static on the radio, as if the structure absorbed and echoed latent memories of unfathomable horror. Walls whispered secrets. The very foundation of the building thrummed with echoes of a past not entirely mortal. And as Darien, if that was indeed his true name, lived out his days in routine solitude, every shadow and every unnatural tremor in the silence served as a portent to his inevitable unraveling. On a particularly frigid November morning, a day so bitterly cold that even the sun seemed reluctant to rise, the man awoke at an ungodly hour. He lay paralyzed in bed, the gray gloom of early dawn bleeding indigo and black into the ceiling. His eyes, still heavy with sleep yet haunted by lucid terror, began to discern figures dancing at the periphery of his vision. They were inconsistent shapes, sometimes human, sometimes vaguely amorphous. At other moments, they glimmered like abstract symbols etched in the fog. Each anomaly nudged the edge of his sanity. Some days, the voices became tender, almost maternal, murmuring softly in a language older than time itself. Remember, remember, they would intone, their syllables a mixture of melancholy and malevolence. On other days, they were insistent and sharp, hissing orders and incomprehensible riddles in a cacophony that shattered the silence of his isolation. Their cadence was that of an unholy hymn, an incantation that promised terrible liberation even as it mired him ever deeper in despair. It was during one such morning, a day heavy with the portent of a coming storm, that Darien sat at an antique desk in the study, its surface littered with yellowed papers and handwritten notes. The desk, a relic acquired along with the house, had once belonged to someone whose imprint of madness seeped into every fiber of its worn wood. At that moment, he began anew to transcribe the messages from the voices. He feverishly scribbled in a battered leather journal as though desperate to capture any hint of meaning before the knowledge eroded his mind entirely. "The door is not a passage, but a threshold," one voice cooed, the words slithering over the paper like ink in water. "What you seek has been within you since the first moment of creation. Let the truth unspool, even as it consumes the light inside." His pen trembled. The script was erratic, a chaotic blend of calligraphy and desperate scrawl. In intervals of lucidity, he would glance at the imposing window that looked out onto an empty lot. There, in the distantly shrouded gloom, modern neon flickered and died, a microcosm of the impermanence that haunted him. It was in these moments that Darian felt a crushing alignment with the universe's indifference, that all transient existence was as delicately frail as spider silk under the weight of cosmic inevitability. The modern world outside moved at a relentless pace. Drones buzzed incessantly overhead, digital screens lit up the night with unfathomable data streams, and people hustled along concrete avenues, oblivious to the hidden fractures in the fabric of reality. Yet inside this solitary refuge, time seemed to pause, suspended between waking nightmares and the quiet horror of recollection. Isolation here was not so much self-imposed as it was a reality physically manifested. The house was an echo chamber of despair, each room a shrine to the haunting legacy of forbidden knowledge. In one particularly fragmented diary entry, its ink smudged with hours of sleepless fervor, Darian wrote, "I have seen the void behind every reflection and every glimmer of modernity. The voices say that I was born to unearth what no mortal should know, the blueprint of cosmic entropy, the dirge of creation itself. Is this knowledge a shackle or a salvation? I feel neither. Rather, it is a slow erosion, like waves lapping at the cliffs of my soul. I cannot escape my fate." That entry, written on a cool, wind-swept evening, marked a turning point. The voices grew bolder, their demands insistent. No longer were they mere background murmurings, they had become an internal tribunal, a chorus that infused every thought with raw, primordial dread. They revealed no clear source, no identifiable root in external phenomena. They were the very exhalation of the void, inherent in Darian's DNA, as old as defunct stars and lost civilizations. The man realized, with a heart-sinking certainty, that his life was not his own but the predetermined path of one entwined with a fate both cosmic and damning. Around mid-afternoon, when the sky behind the urban skyline flickered with the haze of pollution and distant lightning, Darian experienced another disquieting phenomenon. The reflection in his living room mirror, a modern, immaculate piece of glass framed by minimalist chrome, shifted imperceptibly. At first, it was as if a subtle ripple, like a stone tossed into a quiet lake, marred the surface of his image. But as seconds passed, the figure in the mirror began to mutter fragments of speech in a voice that was not his own. "Seek the hidden door. Dissolve the boundary," it hissed, its tone void of warmth. The words vibrated against the silence, clashing with his quickening pulse. When he reached out, the glass remained cold, unyielding. Yet the message lingered in the stagnant air. By evening, the modern conveniences of technology seemed to conspire with his internal torment. His computer screen flickered with lines of cryptic code, symbols that danced and rearranged themselves only to dissolve into static. Emails, half-written and ultimately unsent, filled his inbox, each one contained riddles and warnings. The isolation was no longer only physical, it seeped into every pixel, every fragment of digital data, as if the entire modern infrastructure conspired to reveal secret knowledge to him, inciting the collapse of his ordered life. Within this oppressive atmosphere, Darian began wandering his home as if it were a labyrinth. Corridors once familiar now seemed to shift imperceptibly. Rooms expanded into corridors where light and shadow warred in silent testimony to otherworldly presences. His footsteps, echoing against peeling wallpaper and uneven floors, resonated like the tolling of a death knell. Every creak of the floor responded with murmurs in the language of the void, every gust of wind through a cracked door a reminder that nothing in this world was as it should be. Seated one night amidst scattered papers and a fading overhead light, Darian listened as the voices erupted in a polyphonic cascade. There is no beginning, or is it only the end? From the dark, the truth shall thunder, undone. In each heartbeat, the void rekindles, awaiting the last echo of you. Those words, fragmented and maddening, circled his mind with relentless purpose. They were not mere hallucinations, they were an intrinsic part of his existence. And as the hours bled into one another, time itself began to contort, a worn-out clock on the wall warping its tick-tock into a distorted bassline, echoing like a death march. The modern world outside, with its neon promises and digital distractions, fell away until all that remained was the raw, unyielding interplay of fate, guilt, and cosmic inevitability. In the midst of this profound isolation, time and memory blurred. Darian's recollections fragmented into half-remembered dreams and splintered visions. He recalled passing glimpses of an ancient library with forbidden texts inscribed in languages older than humanity, of spectral figures hovering over dusty ledgers in dim corridors. Those fragments of recollection, and the voices that guided them, suggested that his lineage was tied to secrets sealed away since the beginning of time. Each page of his journal grew denser with esoteric symbols, allusions to rituals and cosmic architectures that defied conventional wisdom. It was as though he were compelled to chart an internal cartography of dread, mapping each hidden compartment of his psyche until every layer of sanity failed. A window in the study, battered with the dust of ages and modern neglect, looked out onto a night-black sky streaked with the occasional glimmer of distant satellites. In that reflective darkness, Darian felt both the insignificance of his own existence and the immense weight of an unfathomable cosmic design. The voices whispered constantly, sometimes as gentle as a lover's breath, sometimes like the clamor of 1,000 dead civilizations. They spoke of a door, both literal and metaphysical, a threshold destined to reveal the terrible truth of creation. And with each whispered invitation came a sense of inevitability. His fate was sealed the day he was born. The cosmos had already written his destiny in the margins of oblivion. As the hours waned and the brittle pages of his notebook filled with frantic script and hastily scrawled diagrams, the atmosphere in the house grew unbearably oppressive. A stifling dread clung to every corner and every discarded scrap of paper. The modern world, with its insidious promises of progress and connection, seemed to fade into a distant dream, a pale background that rendered his isolation even more acute. In that tenuous solitude, Darian could no longer discern whether the insistent voices were a product of his faltering mind or the echo of a cosmic truth too profound for human reason. A fragmented diary note later recalled by an almost unrecognizable voice in his own memory read, "I have seen the architecture of nothingness, the scaffold of an ancient demise. My mind wanders through corridors built of forbidden hieroglyphs, each step marking the descent into an abyss where hope dissolves. I am both the observer and the observed, a solitary witness to a fate I never chose. And yet, I cannot escape." That night, as a violent thunderstorm battered the modern city beyond, Darian sat motionless in the center of his study. Every flash of lightning carved jagged silhouettes on the walls, while every bolt of thunder resonated like a dirge. The voices surged with a newfound intensity, demanding that he confront the truth that lay beyond the threshold of mortal perception. They urged him to seek out the hidden door within the basement, a door that, unlike the rest of the home, defied all modern design. It was an anomaly, a seamless slit in the concrete, cold to the touch and exuding an aura of primeval dread. There, in that isolated recess, lay the promise of forbidden knowledge, the final step in the collapse of the boundaries between the known and the ineffable. But in that moment, fraught with terror and the dark allure of knowledge, the isolation itself became the last vestige of his fading humanity. The voices, now both familiar and alien, coalesced into one undeniable command. The journey had begun long before this night, and his destiny was as inevitable as the cosmos itself. Even as his trembling fingers reached for the unknown threshold, Darian understood with bone-deep clarity that every answer uncovered would usher in deeper questions, a labyrinth without escape. And so it was on that rain-soaked night that, in the oppressive solitude of his crumbling sanctuary, the first chapter of his doomed fate was irrevocably written. Fragmented dreams and whispered prophecies melded in a chorus of inevitable despair. What was once the comfort of isolation was now the prison of fate. A fate interlaced with cosmic horror, stitched together by voices that had always been, and always would be, a part of him. The night deepened. Outside, a solitary car passed silently along an empty highway, its headlights slicing through bitter rain. Inside, the house exhaled a final, dissonant sigh, and the voices, now insistent and insidious, beckoned him further into darkness, abyssal whispers. Time splintered into shards in the aftermath of that fateful night. The modern world, with its relentless pace and sterile rationality, had taken on the aura of a macabre theater, a stage on which Darian's inner tumult unfolded in dissonant fragments. In the days that followed, the boundaries between memory, hallucination, and cosmic revelation blurred. Darian wandered not only the dark corridors of his ancestral home but also those of his own mind, as the voices, innate and unyielding, guided him toward a forbidden repository of knowledge that had lurked in the shadow of his destiny since time immemorial. He recalled little of the transition, the days intermingled with sleepless nights, as a relentless litany of spectral phrases and cryptic codes pervaded every waking moment. The modern conveniences of his daily life assumed a sinister purpose, the humming of the refrigerator, the soft buzz of his smartphone notifications, even the muted conversations drifting from neighbors in a distant apartment block, all seemed to conspire in the language of despair. Every signal, every electronic pulse became a cipher, an echo of a truth far too terrible for comprehension. On one dismal afternoon, when the sky was overcast by heavy clouds and the distant rumble of thunder presaged an approaching deluge, Darian opened a forgotten drawer in his study. Amidst scattered receipts and faded photographs lay a battered notebook with a leather cover worn smooth by years of neglect. It was not his own, yet somehow it resonated with the same dark cadence of his inner voice. The notebook's yellowed pages were filled with cryptic symbols and meticulous diagrams, each more elaborate than the last, maps of celestial alignments and intricate sigils that hinted at cosmic schemes. In the margins were passages in looping script. When the veil between worlds thins, and the eternal silence beckons, the seeker shall know, no mortal mind can bear the weight of creation's undone truth. The very sight of it sent shivers coursing down his spine. Darian's heart pounded with an anticipation that was both dread and desperate longing. Somewhere in that precarious balance lay the forbidden knowledge the voices promised, a revelation that had been forged in the eternal darkness before the dawn of time. The notebook, it appeared, was a guide left by a lineage of souls tormented by the same fate, a memento of lives once consumed by the nadir of cosmic despair. Fragmented flashbacks intruded upon his thoughts. He remembered, or thought he remembered, wandering a labyrinthine library in his childhood dreams, a vast repository of arcane volumes where every book vibrated with an almost sentient darkness. There, murmurings in languages both beautiful and terrible beckoned him deeper into the recesses of forbidden lore. That dream, so vivid yet maddeningly opaque, now returned with renewed ferocity, blurring between hallucination and recollection. In the days that bled into one another, Darian's routine disintegrated into a series of erratic, feverish pursuits. By day, the modern world continued unaffected. Commuters hurried through rain-slicked streets, advertisements glimmered with digital perfection, the pulse of technology thrummed unceasingly around him. But Darian was adrift in his own interstellar sorrow. Every step outside his home was accompanied by the insidious murmurs of the voices, each one a sliver of truth that carved a pathway into the darkest chambers of the universe. They accused him, consoled him, and, above all, compelled him. He was both puppet and prophet in a cosmic drama whose script was written in the blood of existential inevitability. It was during one interminable night, a night when the heavens themselves seemed to weep bitter lamentations, that he left his house. Venturing into the oppressive gloom of the outer world, Darian walked the empty roads where neon signs flickered in language unknown to him, their messages cryptic and decaying. The urban sprawl had become a nightmarish expanse in which every reflection in a window or puddle became a distorted echo of his own torment. The voices, now as constant as the pounding of rain on asphalt, urged him forward, directing him to a place beyond the reach of mundane life, a place where destiny awaited, unadorned and catastrophic. He found himself drawn to an abandoned industrial district on the fringe of the city, a forgotten corner where factories, like mausoleums, stood silent witness to a bygone era of progress. Amid the labyrinth of rusted metal and shattered glass, Darian noticed symbols painted in cryptic runes on the walls. They pulsed faintly in the flickering light of a faulty street lamp, as if animated by secret energies. One symbol in particular, a spiral entwined with an unfathomable glyph, seemed to resonate with the very beat of his heart. In that moment, the voices coalesced into one singular insistence: seek the spiral, there lies the key. It was here, among the ruins of industry, that the fabric of time and reason became perilously thin. Fragments of dread and awe pierced his consciousness as he stumbled upon a narrow passage leading into a subterranean corridor. The air within was damp, cold, and heavy with the weight of millennia. Every footstep echoed, mingling with the distant, unearthly chime of an unknown bell. In the darkness, the voices spoke once more. Dare you unravel the secrets of oblivion? In the abyss lies the manuscript of fate, penned in the ink of dying stars. Embrace the void, for it is you and you are the void. These words, simultaneously an invitation and a curse, drove him onward. With each measured step into the subterranean gloom, Darian felt the boundaries of his self dissolve. The modern world, with its clamor and certainty, receded into irrelevance, replaced by the pulsating emptiness of forbidden revelation. His mind, straining under the weight of the knowledge he was meant to inherit, began to fragment further. Memories, disparate and disjointed, wove together into a tapestry of cosmic insignificance that pointed to a single, immutable truth: his fate was predetermined, and his free will was nothing more than an illusion crafted by forces beyond mortal control. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, lit by an eerie phosphorescence that seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves. Here stood a massive, weathered door etched with symbols that shimmered as if alive under the dancing spectral light. This was the door the voices had mentioned, neither entirely material nor wholly metaphysical, a threshold that bridged the realm of the everyday and that of unspeakable horrors. For a long moment, Darian paused before the door, transfixing himself on the intricate carvings that told stories of creation, decay, and the inexorable passage of fate. The voices pressed him, their timbres merging into an overwhelming cacophony of disembodied truths. The vault of eternal secrets awaits beyond. Cross the boundary and bear witness to the raw edifice of non-existence. In the surrender of self, the knowledge of the cosmos shall consume you. Emotions swirled within him, fear, curiosity, and a grim resolve intermingled in a cocktail of existential dread. His hand, slick with perspiration, reached out to trace one of the carvings. The stone was cold, unyielding, yet he sensed an undercurrent of ancient power pulsing beneath its surface. The boundary between physical matter and ethereal energy blurred as his fingers quivered along the filigree. For an excruciating moment, time itself suspended in anticipation, and the voices rose in a final, discordant crescendo. Inside the chamber, the notebook he had found earlier glowed with an otherworldly light as if recognizing its destined moment. Its pages fluttered though there was no breeze, and its written lines rearranged themselves into new configurations, cryptic formulas that hinted at the mechanics of the universe's demise. Darian felt the weight of revelation pressing down on him. He was not merely a seeker of dark truths, he was the harbinger of knowledge that no human mind should ever endure. What followed were moments of surreal abandon, fragmented scenes of a life unmoored. Faces from long-forgotten dreams and half-remembered nightmares swam before his eyes. He saw himself in the reflection of a broken mirror, a stranger whose eyes were pools of infinite despair. The voices, now permeating every atom of his being, continued their inexorable litany. Knowledge is no gift but a curse, an edict written in the blood of stars. In the cold, indifferent void of creation, every discovery is a betrayal of the self. Embrace the futility, surrender to the inevitable fate that has always been yours. With a shudder that passed through his entire body, Darian stepped forward. The heavy door creaked and groaned in protest as it slowly eased open, revealing not a room but an endless expanse, a vast, cosmic corridor that defied the geometry of the known world. It was as if he had stepped not into another chamber but into a realm where time, matter, and identity dissolved into swirling chaos. Every fragment of his being trembled under the paradox. Here lay the forbidden knowledge, the raw scaffold of what it meant to be both mortal and insignificant against the backdrop of the infinite. And so, in that moment of final clarity, when the modern world was no more than a distant memory and the mechanizations of everyday life had evaporated, Darian crossed the threshold. The voices, now a singular, omnipresent force, followed him relentlessly into the yawning void. The corridor beyond the door was not lit by conventional light but by the cold radiance of distant galaxies, a vision so vast and indifferent that it threatened to shatter every vestige of his fragile identity. In the ensuing hours, and perhaps in eternities that transcended human reckoning, Darian wandered these interstitial realms. Reality was a patchwork of fragmented memories and cosmic insignificance, where the line between dream and waking nightmare was irrevocably blurred. Each fragment of his experience was intercut with the omnipresent cadence of the voices, urging him ever deeper into that dark reservoir of forbidden wisdom. There, in the silence of the void, he discovered hints of a horrifying truth, that every soul, every particle in existence, was doomed to dissolve into nothingness, a final, unalterable surrender to the cosmic entropy that lay at the heart of creation. Yet amid this overwhelming despair, a perverse clarity began to emerge. The forbidden knowledge was not merely a burden but also a mirror reflecting the inherent futility of striving against an immutable fate. Each whispered secret, each cosmic equation etched in the darkness, was a reminder that the search for meaning in a vast, uncaring universe was, at its core, a solitary, tragic endeavor. In that realization, Darien both wept and smiled, for in the relinquishment of his own expectations lay the bitter acceptance of his place in the grand tapestry of nothingness. Thus, as the spectral corridor of cosmic horror unfurled around him, Darien, lost in the labyrinth of his own unraveling, became both witness and participant in a drama too profound for words. The voices, the forbidden notebook, the threshold of the ancient door, all merged into a single inevitable truth, that the elusive knowledge of the cosmos was a passage with no return, a descent into an abyss where isolation reigned supreme and fate waited, unmoved, as the final exposé of human insignificance. In that eternal moment, the boundaries of self even further disintegrated. The modern man, shaped by routines and digital certainties, was rendered transparent against the cosmic tableau. And yet, as the fragments of his former life scattered like motes in a starless void, a single realization crystallized amid the endless black. There is no escape from the knowledge, and there is no end to the inevitable descent. The night whispered on, and in every silent corner of the universe, the voices persevered, untainted by hope, unchanged by time. The inevitable unraveling. There are moments in life when the fabric of reality seems to tear, when the weight of forbidden truth becomes an unbearable burden, when every atom of one's being vibrates to the inaudible thrum of cosmic despair. For Darien, such moments were no longer isolated instances but a ceaseless cascade, a perpetual unraveling of existence that defied all notions of salvation, where every step toward understanding only hastened the inevitable dissolution of self. In the aftermath of that fateful crossing, the memories of a modern life fell away like brittle leaves blown by a merciless wind. Darien's existence became a series of disjointed events, a collage of flashbacks and surreal interludes. The voices, which had once been gentle murmurings amid the quiet hours, now erupted with an unyielding ferocity that consumed all semblance of remorse or hope. They interlaced his sensory reality as if every shadow, sound, and fleeting image were imbued with their malignant purpose. Every moment was an echo of that ancient promise: the knowledge was forbidden, the fate was sealed, and escape was but an illusion. He found himself in spaces that defied modern understanding, empty corridors that spanned into infinity, vast expanses where the only illumination was the dim glimmer of distant, dying stars. In these moments, the modern world was no longer measured by time or space but by the unfathomable void that lay at the heart of all things. Here, drenched in the slow, inexorable pull of existential gravity, Darien pressed forward through landscapes that shifted like memories under a turbulent sky. Within one such fragment, a desperate, half-remembered recollection, he recalled stumbling upon a derelict chapel. Its modern stained glass windows, warped into spectral distortions, cast kaleidoscopic patterns on the cracked pavement. In that silence, the voices spoke in unison. Every faith, every hope, mere illusions to mask the truth of cosmic decay. In the abandonment, find the invitation; in despair, the key. The modern remnants of human history, the skyscrapers, the meticulous grids of streets, the shimmering data streams of the internet, transmuted in his perception into relics of a lost era, heralds of a futility that predated even human thought. The abandoned chapel, the industrial ruins, the ceaseless torrent of urban chaos, each became a symbol of his inner fragmentation, of the inevitable disintegration of order into the sublime chaos of doom. In a disjointed montage of vision and memory, Darien experienced what it was to exist beyond the confines of linear time. He watched as moments overlapped like layers of film, the tender laughter of an innocent childhood intermingled with the cacophonous dirge of collapsing cosmic structures. In one fleeting glimpse, he saw his own reflection, broken into 1,000 shards that danced against an endless void. In another, the voices recited cryptic couplets that hinted at an arcane design behind every heartbeat. In the endless twilight, the knowledge sings. In every atom, fate's bell clings. Doomed are we, to know the divine, to fade in the void, where stars silently whine. There was no escape from these whispered verses. They seeped into his consciousness like a persistent virus, irrevocably altering his understanding of self and universe alike. His identity was no longer that of a solitary modern man but a living vessel for cosmic inevitability, a fuse burning steadily toward an end that promised nothing but eternal darkness. And yet, even as his mind unraveled, a part of him clung to the faintest remnant of what once was, a hope, perhaps, that understanding might be a gateway to transcendence rather than obliteration. But such hope was ephemeral, a mere ghost against the overwhelming certainty of fate. Days, or what passed for days in the timeless fluidity of his altered state, melted into each other. In one unmistakable fragment, Darien found himself alone in a room that was not quite his own, a place where time measured not by clocks but by the silent progression of cosmic decay. The walls were inscribed with symbols similar to those in the forbidden notebook. They pulsed as if imbued with an unseen heartbeat. In a moment of clarity that was as painful as it was revelatory, he realized that these symbols were not created by any hand of man but were integral to the unfolding structure of existence. They were the language of a primordial force, a message literally written into the very fabric of reality. This is the end of knowledge and the beginning of oblivion. In our unity, all shall vanish, and in our silence, the cosmos will continue unburdened. As if to punctuate that cosmic decree, the room darkened further, the single light source, a flickering LED panel, dimmed into near nothingness, leaving Darien cocooned in oppressive darkness. In the black void, the voices took on a tangible heft, their cadence resonating with a finality that shook the foundations of every wrought thought. They no longer spoke in riddles but in a single, unwavering command: surrender completely to the inevitable, become one with the void. In the ensuing chaos of internal collapse, Darien wandered the corridors of his inner landscape as though roaming a vast necropolis of memories. In every shattered fragment of his psyche, he saw silhouettes of those who had come before him, the long-dead progenitors who had similarly borne the weight of forbidden knowledge. Their spectral presences whispered of doomed fates and the unbearable lightness of being, each revelation a shard of cold truth that chipped away at his remaining defenses. In one particularly harrowing moment, he encountered what he could only describe as the living echo of his own despair, a reflection of the self he had lost to the abyss. This doppelganger, fashioned of pure, insidious darkness, stood silently by his side and intoned. The fate is preordained, the knowledge is a wound. You have felt the cosmos weep, and now you must let it tear you apart. The words reverberated within him, the very syllables a bell tolling the demise of hope. And though Darien wanted, no, he yearned, to resist, the pull was absolute. Every effort to cling to a semblance of normality was undermined by the overwhelming tide of cosmic insignificance. The modern life he once knew was not only inaccessible but nothing more than an echo of a past that had never truly belonged to him. Every street, every conversation, every digital signal faded into irrelevance when measured against the scale of infinity that the voices evoked. In his final moments of lucidity, a lucidity that was as disjointed as it was fleeting, Darien began to compile a final, disorganized mosaic of all he had seen and heard. The scattered notes, the cryptic diagrams, the voices, endless refrain merged into an overwhelming tableau of existence and non-existence. Each carefully penned line in his journal was a desperate bid for understanding, an attempt to capture the boundless emptiness his mind now inhabited. And as his pen moved almost involuntarily across the page, he wrote, "Time is a lie, and fate is carved into every breath. I have danced with the void and felt the cold embrace of forbidden truth. There is no salvation here, only the inescapable unraveling of self. I am, and always shall be, a wisp in the inexorable wind of the cosmos." It was not a prayer, but a farewell, a final acknowledgement of his irrevocable merging with the overwhelming emptiness of being. The voices, once soothing and intangible, had grown to embody the entirety of that truth. They were now a single, monstrous chorus that roared in the silence of his eroding mind, each note a reminder that every quest for meaning only deepened the chasm between mortal aspiration and the indifferent vastness of the universe. In the last remnants of his scattered awareness, Darien took tentative steps toward what he could only describe as the nadir of existence, a place where the modern world and its illusions were completely obliterated by the raw, unyielding force of cosmic desolation. There, suspended in a state of agonizing clarity amid swirling cosmic shadows, he understood the ultimate horror, that the forbidden knowledge which had haunted him from birth was not a secret to be uncovered but rather the very substance of his doom. His own nature was inextricably bound to an ancient decree, a fate that demanded complete annihilation of the self in exchange for an understanding that no mortal mind could truly sustain. And so, amid the Stygian silence of that final unlit corridor, Darien surrendered. There was no moment of triumphant revelation, no catharsis that banished the dread. Instead, there was only the quiet, insidious acceptance that he was destined for oblivion. The voices receded into a final, resonant murmur, a last echo of the cosmic dirge that had accompanied him throughout his shattered life. You have become the vessel of fate, the witness to eternal decay. There is no escape, no resolution, only the inexorable march toward unmaking. As the darkness closed in, every fragment of his identity dissolved into a spectral haze. The once modern world, filled with bustling streets, digital chatter, and hopeful progress, was now as remote and trivial as a forgotten dream. In its place, only the barren, unerring cadence of destiny remained, an all-consuming void that promised nothing but the final, unalterable end. There is no solace in isolation, no triumph in forbidden knowledge. There is only the endless, unavoidable descent, a falling into an abyss where modernity, reason, and self are all rendered moot. And in that everlasting silence, where stars flicker and die without fanfare, the truth endures. The fate of all living things is to be consumed by the dark, indifferent expanse of the cosmos, and ultimate dissolution of every last shred of hope. In the final, unresolvable moment of his fragmented existence, as the last vestiges of light were swallowed by the infinite void, Darien's form, his soul, his mind, his very being, merged with that all-pervading silence. The voices faded into nothingness, leaving behind only an eternal echo, a whisper of the doomed fate that had been his from the first breath. And so, the modern man, born with those unholy voices, became no more than a memory, a cautionary fragment in the tapestry of the universe's relentless, uncharted decay. The forbidden knowledge was spoken, the fate was sealed, and the descent was complete. There was no solace, no escape, no final resolution, only the lingering dread of an inevitable nothingness that waited in the silent, endless dark. The cosmos continues, indifferent and eternal, as a million forgotten souls dissolve into its cold embrace, a perpetual reminder that in the grand scheme of creation, all is doomed to vanish into the void. There is no epilogue, no neatly wrapped conclusion, just the raw, unyielding truth of a fate that was written long before the first heartbeat and will persist long after all names and memories have faded into the whispering dark.